So let's look at the symbolic nature of the beast in Revelation 17. Now this interpretation of Revelation 17 will help us to understand the dragon of Revelations 12 and the beast of Revelations 13 also. This will help us understand that because of the interpretation of the scarlet beast, which is actually the same as this one here. It's just that they're just in two different forms, but it's talking about the same being. And it says here in Revelation 17, and the beast that was, and it says here, and here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Okay, so we're just going to remember there that a lot of people think to themselves that this is talking about 7 kingdoms. There's some people that think that this is, because kings rule kingdoms. But I would say in a later talk that we have to interpret, as I've learned from Michael Heiser, is that we have to, if it's telling us the interpretation that these 7 heads are literally talking about mountains. I can't see an interpretation and then of another symbolism and then trying to figure out what that could be meaning. It's the angel is telling us exactly what it literally means, the symbolism. And so that means that the 7 heads of the dragon, the 7 heads of this beast here of Revelation 13 and this, they're all symbolic of mountains. And also, and it says here, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. So we have here again 7 heads, also represents kings, 7 mountains and 7 kings. What we learn here is that 5 kings have fallen, and 1 is still alive, while John, the reveler, of writing Revelations, revealing Revelations to us, we're still writing Revelations. So that's when. So he's obviously going to be dead and gone. So, but we still have this 7th king, which is the AntiChrist king, who continues a short space of 3.5 years. So we're still waiting for the 7th head. You could say we're still waiting for him to come around. It says here, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. Now this is very, very important to help us to understand the rest of this. It says here, and is of the 7. Now we know that 6 of the kings are dead and gone, so this means that Apollyon is going to be of the 7th king in the future. So this beast is the 8th king, and because the other ones are dead and gone, the Antichrist will be one, and the Apollyon will be one with each other and will work together to take over the world. So the Antichrist king is one with Apollyon, the 8th king, because of what this is helping us to understand, because they're connected to each other in some way. I would say probably through a form of possession, that Apollyon is possessing the Antichrist. It says here, Revelation 13, and we find that the 7th head is wounded. This head has to be the Antichrist, the 7th king. Now what we have to also understand is that it doesn't really give us an interpretation, but this is still talking in symbolic language. And what you find is that the context is still all about war. It's not a literal death and resurrection. A lot of people were thinking to themselves that, the Antichrist, he might be assassinated, and then he will die, and then he'll be resurrected, and then people will start becoming amazed, and they will want to worship him, kind of thing. But I would say that this is not talking about a literal wound, but it has to be talking, because when you look at the context here, it's all about war, because it says here, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? So the whole context there of the world's way of thinking is that it's all to do with war. So that's what we're going to be looking at. And this is where I had to actually parallel this with Daniel 11, which we'll just get into this next. In Revelation 13, the deadly wound of the Antichrist, I would say that this in Daniel 11, the Antichrist loses a war to the Cyprus Navy. This is the deadly wound because it's all to do with war, symbolically. Both Apollyon and the Antichrist are losing a war together because the Antichrist is using the strange god to go against the strongest of fortresses, as we've read in Daniel 11. So both of them are actually losing a war here. And it is a serious loss because the Antichrist becomes grieved and so he becomes disheartened. So what we find here is later on is that we find we find here that his deadly wound wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and then the world wandered after the beast. So when he gets healed, we actually find in Daniel 11, after Antichrist's defeat, he becomes strong again with Apollyon, and they both then go to war with the countries. So we're just going to read into that now, for when they eventually start to take over the whole world eventually. And it says here in Daniel 11 verse 40, and it says, And at the time of the end shall the king, which is the king of the south, push at him. Okay, so the king of the south is another kingdom that's going against the Antichrist. And it says here, And the king of the north, which is the Antichrist, shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, and with horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. And then you can read the rest of it, and you'll find that he starts taking over, many other countries. Takes over Egypt as well, and all the treasures that are there in Egypt. So that's how I'll read into that the deadly wound is healed, and then he becomes strong again with Apollyon, and then the world is amazed by him because he's able to go to war with all these other countries, and then the world ends up wondering, who's able to make war with the beast, because of how Apollyon, this particular god that the Antichrist, we have learned, has been promoting, has been honoring in his estate. So what we find here is that we have to look at how the beast, Apollyon, becomes this eighth king as well. And it says here in Revelation 13 verse 2, And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. So the dragon Satan gave the beast Apollyon his power and his seat and great authority. So the dragon Satan, just learned here, and this, of course, just shows us how this particular beast Apollyon gets his kingship status, because the dragon Satan was perceived as a type of supreme being type of thing, king of the gods, and he was seen as the god of this world because he's deceiving the whole world. And what he's doing is he's stepping down from his throne, and he's letting Apollyon, the fallen angel, take his place instead, so he can eventually deceive the world and get the world to worship him as well. Revelation 17 tells us the beast Apollyon is of the seventh king, the Antichrist. So that's one of the most important points we need to remember. The beast Apollyon and Antichrist are one with each other. So the key word in Revelation 13 is the word given. That's what we actually have to pay very close attention to. So the beast Apollyon is given the Antichrist king to work through in Revelation 13. So this is where we're going to be able to clear up the confusion as to that we're reading about the beast, but it seems like you're reading about the Antichrist, but in reality they're actually one and the same. They're connected to each other. So that's what we're going to be looking into. You could say that in Revelation 13 that it's talking from the Apollyon's perspective. It's talking about how he's experiencing the world, and how he's how he's been given this Antichrist. So it's almost like you're looking at his story, Apollyon's story. That's how just to help us to understand what's actually going on here. So here we have it, and it says here, and there was given, Revelation 13, unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And of course, whose mouth is that? So in other words, the beast Apollyon is given the mouth of the Antichrist, because he's now working, he's of the Antichrist. The Antichrist has a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, as we have learned in Daniel 11. Without the Antichrist, the beast Apollyon will not have a mouth speaking great things. So it makes sense when we read it like that. The symbolic nature there. In Revelation 13, verses, this is still the same verse, and it says here, and power, which is actually authority, that when you look at the language, was given unto him to continue 42 months. So the beast Apollyon gets his authority from the Antichrist king, because they're of each other, they're connected to each other, for 3.5 years. So both Apollyon and Antichrist are in Jerusalem. This is what this context is, for 3.5 years, for eventually the war on the saints. Revelations 13 verse 6, and it says here, and he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. So there we have it. We have the beast Apollyon is speaking through the Antichrist, the one that's got the mouth speaking great things, to blaspheme God in the temple of God in Jerusalem. That's what's taking place here. So we're starting to get, starting to make sense now why it's talking like this. Revelation 13 verse 7. And it says here, and it was given unto him, this is the word given, to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. I read a bit too far, but we'll get to that part later. So we've got here the word given. The beast Apollyon is given the Antichrist king, and the two of them will go to war against the saints in Jerusalem, and it will be worldwide also, for the future when people are not taking the mark of the beast. So that's what has to be going on here. And the rest of it in Revelations 13 verse 7. Oh, wait a minute. Is that? Yeah, I've got 2 slides. That's what's wrong. I thought I got rid of it. Sorry about that. Yeah, this is the rest of the verse here. The rest of it, verse 7, and power was given. And it says here, and power, which is authority, again it's authority, when you go to the language, was given him, which is Apollyon,